Amy Williams, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. How you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
We've got Captain the Cat, who's going to be in and out. He's just given us a lovely intro. It looks like he's settled down. But look, I am actually fascinated in the sport that you got into. And for those of the listeners who potentially don't know the sport skeleton, we can get into describing it, but I'd actually really be interested in how you first got into it, how you first started. I've read that you were a runner before. So yeah, maybe you can go into a little bit more about how you got into the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it is a quite unusual sport, skeleton. I mean, all the winter sports, you either kind of have that childhood where you're going off skiing with parents all the time, or something quite unusual like skeleton, bobsleigh, the sliding sports. It is very unusual. So I mean, for me, it was living in Bath. That's my home and still is now. And they've just built a special start track. So it's called a push track at the University of Bath. And they had just built that for the Salt Lake City Games in 2002 for the bobsleigh and skeleton athletes to train on. So it's just that pure sprint. You have a different kind of design of a sled with wheels that slots onto literally like almost like a train track. And you just practice that biomechanical sprint start and diving onto the sled. So just that pure sort of first part of our race. So yeah, I was a background of athletics, running, sprinting, and was looking for something different because I knew I wasn't fast enough for 400. That's what I was aiming to do, was 400 meters. And I was plagued with a lot of injuries like shin splints, compartment syndrome. So all my lower legs, I had a lot of problems. So I was looking for a sport that wasn't that kind of longer distance pounding the pavements kind of thing. And yeah, happened to speak to some people who were skeleton and bobsleigh athletes, and they were about to go down and do a special session on this push track. I invited myself along and had a go. And yeah, it was pretty quick, kind of picked it up pretty quickly. And yeah, sort of summarizing quite quickly, I ended up competing, and I asked if I could go out to compete for Great Britain, and it was like a guest category in the World Push Championship. So that was in Holland, in Groningen, in the summer of 2002. So pretty quickly they were like, yeah, if you spend your, find your own way out there on the trains and whatever, you can compete for Great Britain. There's a guest category, off you go. So you're not part of the proper team. And yeah, I won my guest category, came second overall, was really quite quick. So it was just that start bit, just that sprint start, nothing to do with ice. And they said, look, do you want to have a go on the real thing and join an army ice camp? So that was the only way at that point in time, was to the military was huge into all the winter ice sports. So I paid my way to do a 2-week army ice camp with a few other civilians. And yeah, just learn what the sport was about, what it was like sliding on the ice. And that was in Norway, in Lillehammer.
Wow.
Yeah, so I guess sort of the rest is history, but obviously a very long journey from those first ever times down the ice.
Yeah, so just kind of giving a little bit more description for the listeners, a lot of people are probably aware of the bobsleigh, but just describe the difference between bobsleigh and the skeleton.
Yes, so everyone kind of knows bobsleigh because of your Cool Runnings film,
Yeah.
the Jamaican bobsleigh team, and you have 4 men or 2 men or women. And skeleton is head first on your stomach on what people call a tea tray, but we get a bit insulted by that, but I still explain it. Yeah, it's a tea tray, but it really isn't. Yeah, so head first on our stomach, inches off the ice, and then you've got luge, which is on your back, feet first. So they're the three sliding sports down the same ice track. And a bit like Formula One, there are ice tracks all around the world. You go from one to each one. It's like a circuit. Every week in the competition season, you're racing every week and traveling between, I don't know, like Germany's got 3 tracks that you slide on. There's 2 in America, 2 in Canada. And you just travel around a circuit competing.
So you said there you describe it as a tea tray. So how do you steer? How do you actually get from point A at the top to point B at the bottom?
Yeah, so a sled is just over a meter long. So when you're lying on it, your shoulders are on it and your knees, and then it kind of stops. So between your shoulders and your knees, you're lying on a stainless steel frame structure. And then you've got a belly pan, which is a bit like a bonnet on the car. So that's the bit that sort of covers up the inner workings. You've got a saddle, a handle that goes around and is molded around your body. And that's what you hold on to when you're actually sprinting and pushing next to it. And then you dive on, and it sort of loosely holds you onto the sled. So we lie on our stomachs, shoulders really flat. So if I'm teaching people, young kids or whatever, I'm like, pretend you're a sack of potatoes. You flomp onto the sled as, as relaxed as you can. And yet at the same time, you've got enough tension in your body that you can almost, like in that plank position, hold your body solid, feet together, shoulders down. And then you tuck your head up. So your chin is sort of off the ice, but you're in a really aerodynamic position. And then you steer from putting pressure through your shoulders. You can steer with opposite knee to opposite shoulder. The middle of the sled is like in a pivot point, and you have runners on the bottom of the sled. So the runners are like your tires on a car. You have different treads on the tire of your car, and Lewis Hamilton's going to be switching over those tires depending on what the weather is, depending on what the tarmac's like. We're very similar. So we would switch over those runners depending on how sharp we wanted it to be. There's half of it in like a knife, a cutout shape, and that cuts into the ice. So depending on how sharp they are, how cold the ice is, if there's water layer on the ice, loads of different things that we read into. It's very scientific. You choose what you have, and that will help you grip as you steer the sled around the corners. The oscillations, the highs and the lows of the natural waves in a corner, you want to steer them as flat as you can to get that fastest line through every single corner on a track.
And the speed you're getting up to, I mean, what's the fastest speed you would reach on a sled?
The Olympics, I got to 143 kilometers per hour, which in my head, I always was told it was 92 miles per hour. But when I did a bit of research the other day and I properly looked, it isn't 92 miles per hour. It's something like 88 or 89. So I was a bit gutted about that. But yes, that's the fastest speeds I got to. Average, you're talking between 70 and 80 miles per hour. Every track is between sort of 14 and 19 corners, and about 1,400 to 1,900 meters long. Yeah. And you're taking roughly between 45 and 60 odd seconds. So like a minute, less than a minute normally to get down a track.
Yeah. Do you measure things like G-force of what you're doing? I imagine that's quite a big measurement in what you do.
Yeah, back in my day of sliding, we didn't measure it as such in our sleds. It was just the design of the track. You knew some of it was, 4 to 5 Gs of pressure, just in certain corners, in really high G-force corners. And it was higher than if you went wrong. So if you went into the corner the wrong way, slightly too left or too right, that G-force would really hit you. I mean, I've blacked out before. I've seen stars. It can go a bit wrong. So yeah, you've got to be on it. There are rules. It can only be for a certain split seconds or whatever, because obviously then it generally is really dangerous. Yeah, it's a little bit crazy when I think about it now. It is crazy.
So you're almost saying that just before you would crash, you're gone. Like you can't see, you can't really, you're not knowing what's going on if you do black out.
Yeah, I mean, luckily I've been blacked out for a few, like a second or something, and you back out and you're like, whoa, okay, and I'm trying to go down and I can see little tiny stars in your eyes. Yeah, it can be a bit dodgy, I guess.
Yeah, well, you mentioned there as well about how it's now measured. It's probably, I imagine there's a lot more technology thrown into something like this to really eke out every last millisecond of what you got. And you spoke about how you were not funded and you got into the sport not funded, and that can be a case for a lot of athletes that are in probably not your billboard sports. And that are probably not the ones that are heavily funded. And if people don't really know too much about Olympic sports, they gain and lose funding depending on the success of that sport. It can be super brutal. So when you were growing up with that lack of funding, that lack of backing essentially. How did you deal with that? How did you find yourself self-doubt, like, why am I doing this? I'm taking myself all there across the world to do this? Or were you really driven by the passion of what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, like you say, when I first started, there was absolutely no funding at all. The program and structure of the sport had only just sort of come to it. There was only just a performance director who'd been employed. He was trying his hardest to get UK sport and lottery funding. So there was little tiny bits dribbling in. So as an athlete, we had to contribute quite a bit ourselves to the season. We still got some equipment given to us. There was still a sled that was loaned to you, but we had to buy in our own, those metal runners that I spoke about, which, were kind of £200-400 a pair, and you needed several pairs. Our helmets cost 500 quid. Like, there was a lot of money you did have to invest. My very first, a proper decent helmet, a little old lady in the village that I actually live in now bought me my first helmet, and that stuck with me to this day. And actually a few years back, I was at a charity event, and a motocross young athlete really needed a helmet and needed more money, and I did exactly the same back to him. And amazing. Luckily was in that position then to be like, what, I will buy your helmet. You get your parents to tell me how much they need, and I'll do the same back. So it was like beg, borrow, steal type of thing. I lived back with my parents. I didn't need to rent, luckily, in Bath, so I saved money in that sense by moving back in with parents. I got a full-time job, but I was able to go to the gym when it opened at 6 o'clock, do my first gym session, go and work, and then clock off at like 4 o'clock, go straight back to the next gym session, dinner, bed, sleep, wake up, do the same thing. So it was quite tough in that sense. And then as the sport got a bit better and we did manage to bring in medals, World Cup medals, we did manage to gain more funding as a sport. And that slowly increased each year. And then luckily as an athlete, we can get lottery funding. So when I was in it, you could only get lottery funding off of a world championships. So one race a year that you knew you had to qualify to do. So, you had to be on your game in every single race to qualify that 1 or 2 spots in a world champs. And then it was like, I think it was a top 12, a top 8 or a top 3. So if you got in those categories, you got your 3 different levels of lottery funding, which back then was something like £12,000. If you were a top 12, it was something like £15,000 for a top 8. And I think £18,000 for a top 3 place. And that's what you had to live off, for the whole year. So your rent, your food, your equipment, everything. So yeah, most athletes were still working. Nowadays, it's very different. So luckily, we were told in Vancouver, we had to bring home a medal. Skeleton had to bring home a medal of one colour, male or female, for the sport to continue. If we didn't bring home a medal, the sport would have stopped. We all hear about sports that are suddenly, don't have the funding. So luckily, my medal managed to keep the funding going, and we managed to maintain that. And luckily now athletes don't have to contribute anything. They're in really nice hotels. They have all the equipment given to them. They don't, everything is given to them. And it's a very, very different world now to, even when I started in 2002, it's worlds apart.
But that must be actually really rewarding for yourself as well. Like that one run in Vancouver that has like trailblazed the entirety of your sport and actually laid a foundation for someone like Lizzie Arnold to go and actually get her medals. And that's all thanks to the fact that you won gold and you brought back that medal. That's quite crazy, actually, if you really think about that.
Yeah, it's obviously we knew the pressure was really on us. We definitely felt it in Vancouver, and that pressure was we had to perform. There was a lot of money that went into the sport just before an Olympic Games. Normally the year before, summer or winter games, you get given some extra money from lottery, from the government, from UK Sport or something, for research and development. So Skeleton did put that to good use, and we knew we had to justify that money that had been spent. So whether that was going on spending time in wind tunnels, looking at our equipment, our our race suits, our helmets, whatever it might be. So there was a lot of pressure that we knew we had to bring home a medal to keep our sport alive. And yeah, it does feel really good. Lizzie Arnold, Laura Dees, Don Parsons, so they're the ones that have now come and brought the next medals home. They had only just come into that sport then. So they were the development squad. Wow. The money after Vancouver was going to them to make them the athletes that they then became. So yeah, it's that kind of legacy, I guess, that I don't really think about it, but
it owes you a lot in the sense of what you managed to pull off. If you hadn't done it, it's not there. When let's actually go back to Vancouver, the actual run itself, and you said there a lot of pressure on you, which is incredible that you almost knew about that. That's an added pressure that a lot of athletes potentially don't have. You win, lose, you come first, second, third. But to have the pressure that your sport may not continue for your country after, how were you managing that? Can you even get back to thinking about how you were managing that pressure? What things you were thinking about? Was it just about the runs, and how were you dealing with it?
Yeah, it's funny. I guess we all knew as a sport. So what were there? 2-3 men competing then, and 2 of us females. We knew that. At the same time, you can't focus on it. It was just in the back of your mind. We have to bring home a medal. That was our target. So it was there. And then on the flip side, I mean, personally, you want to win home, win a medal. So although you knew you had to do it for the sport, you wanted to do it for you, because that was what you trained day in, day out to do. And I guess as that build up happens over the years, over those months, the previous year I had won a silver medal in the World Cup race on the Vancouver track. So I knew, okay, I like, this track suits me. I can do well here. So almost that build up coming up to it, and, the races leading up to it. Do you think you can win a medal? Do you not? And, you know that you're capable. And I knew I was capable of winning that medal. And then you've got your 6 runs to learn the track. So when you turn up to a competition, and for us in an Olympic Games or any competition, you have 3 days of training, 2 runs a day, 6 runs to learn that track. And the Canadians had been sneaky, the ice wasn't the same. The way the profile of the corners in the ice, they had changed. So when you look back at previous years' notes and you write them all down after you do each run, they were different. They were really, really different. And lots of people struggled. It was the fastest track in the world. So they'd really made it so fast, which did petrify a lot of people. We had the fear of that speed of, they'd made it the fastest track in the world. So there was a lot of pressure all around, and yet there's no greater pressure than I think you put on yourself as an athlete of, I want to win a medal. I know I can win a medal, and I know I'm good enough to win a medal. And then all at the same time, you're putting all of that to the back of your mind, because at the end of the day, you just have to do your day job. You just have to rock up every day, eat the same breakfast, do that same warm up, get your sled ready, and do everything just the same as you would for any other day, any other race. And, for me, I was very believing that if I've done 100% every day to this point, when I stand on that start line for 2 days of racing, so 4 runs, 2 runs a day, every one of those 4 runs counted to that Olympic time. You stood on that start line and you had to empty that brain out and just do what you knew you had to do, and kind of like make all that other stuff disappear.
Yeah. Wow. That lack of practice that you're getting is insane. Like that's not a lot of practice that you're getting on something that is going to happen so fast. And you mentioned it at the start, actually, about Cool Runnings being a big part of it. And there's a scene in Cool Runnings actually where he's visualizing the turns. He's like sitting in the bath and he's like turning. Did you ever use something like that, like something as visual as visualization and almost going down the luge yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I don't sit in a bathtub to do it. I have sometimes our sleds are most of the time in our hotel bedrooms, like there's not normally anywhere to keep them. So yeah, I mean, especially when you're beginning, you literally lie on your sled, and I would set up videos on my computer. You know, you would watch the track, and you would do it either with your eyes open when you were beginning and visualizing and feeling that sled underneath you. And then, like, even now, I could shut my eyes now and you tell me a track in the world, I can shut my eyes and I can see every single bit of the corner. I can go down that track in my head now. And so for us, yeah, visualization is a huge, huge part of our sport, because you only get those 6 runs. So the more times that you can study the track, for us, we walk the track. So we walk in the track with special spikes on they're called galoshes. No, galoshes are what protect our spikes. They've got really weird names anyway. So you can walk down the track and you look at the ice, you look at the lumps, the bumps, the profile, the shadows, the light, the dark, and all of that side of things. And then we write notes. So we write really detailed track notes of what steers we're doing, what the corners look like, how did it feel? Did we hear something different with the ice, like a... You know, did we skid into a corner? All these different things, the air temperature, the time of day, you know, whatever, all these different facts. So we build up this big picture, and then we shut our eyes and we go through every single part. So we piece it all together. So then we can run through that whole track in our head. And the more we can practice it then in our head, obviously with those very limited physical runs, the more it's just ingrained in you. So for us, it's really important, especially we're a nation that doesn't have an ice track. So it's not like the Canadians who had done hundreds of runs down that track, or the Germans who know their tracks inside out, upside down. They could literally do it with their eyes shut. You know, we really, really have to focus in and how we can learn tracks really quickly.
Did you find it gave you a lot of confidence when you did it?
Yeah, I mean, you had to gain confidence from all those different areas. And I think for me, I wasn't the most confident athlete. My coach will straight away tell you that. Yeah, I was always the one who didn't necessarily believe in myself. But I got my confidence knowing that I had prepared better than anyone. So I really, truly put my hand on my heart, was like, I know I have done every gym session for the last 4 years to my best ability. I've eaten to my best ability. I've recovered. I've stretched. I've done every session I could ever imagine. I've looked after my body. And then, I've mentally prepared. So I felt like if I could do all those things, and I had this little tick box routine, and the last thing I looked at before I went down that race was this little card with 4 or 3 boxes, little ticks in it. And it just was a little visual to say, you've done everything. You've ticked every box to get to this point. Now just let it go. Whatever your result is going to be, whether it's 1st, 4th, 10th, like that is your best, because you have done everything you physically could. So for me, that's where I got that confidence from, and kind of in that sense, let destiny, do the rest.
Yeah, well, it's a really nice affirmation to give yourself just before you go off. And I imagine a lot of from a physical point of view, a lot of your start is so important. So getting that speed up early, and then, like you said, just execute that, get going, and then making those small adjustments as you go down. When there's also a lot of, if you type in Amy Williams anywhere, there's a lot of talk about injuries, and injury was a part of the reason why you actually ended up finishing. Was that coming from the actual physical requirement of the sport? Was it coming from injuries through crashes, or what is your experience with how it's impacted your body?
Yeah, so it's funny. I've never just pulled a hamstring. Like, I've never kind of got a muscle injury just from somebody doing something in a gym or going off for a jog and your calf muscle goes or something. Like, yeah, so for me, the very first injury was a really bad crash when I was learning, and it was on a really, really tough track in Germany. And me and the corner wheel went wrong. And so that, in hindsight, that probably slipped my first disc in my lower back. And then the knock-on effect of that over the years, definitely I ended up, sort of 3-4 degenerative bulging discs in my lower back, one in my neck from a crash. So that was definitely that kind of rust on a bike chain. You do one and then it slowly the ones around it suffer as well. And because then our sport in that bent over sprint position does put quite a lot of pressure on your lower back. So that was kind of like my back injuries. So they, caused a lot of sciatic pain, a lot of pain all down my legs all the time. So I had a lot of, several times a year, injections to try and nerve root block, get rid of that pain, which now I've stopped because, doctors just like, you just really can't have any more. It's really bad. But now I suffer from sciatic pain a lot. It's quite tough. And then the knees, I bashed a knee on the end of a track once, again in Germany. It's always in Germany. And that, you never know, it just shifts that bit of cartilage, or, we've probably all had floaty bits of cartilage around, and meniscus plica, and underneath my kneecaps were really, really rough. So at separate times, both my knees, I had sort of keyhole surgery, to clean up, tidy up, and then they end up taking quite a lot out, and you're recovering from that. And then my two major knee ops were once I retired. So I had only said I've retired the week before, and I was testing out a piece of equipment in the gym, an eccentric bike machine. So you instead of pushing away like a leg press, you're forcing your leg not to come back, and seat wasn't set up right, and my leg basically bent the wrong way with this force platform going against it. So just don't even think about it. My knee went the wrong way. So that was major surgery to put that knee back together. And I had the surgery was all covered, but then because I'd retired, I had no support with physio, no support getting back. I was on my own. Luckily, I had already knew what to do from the previous two. And then, a few years later, just constant pain, then in the other one. And I had knee alignment surgery. So where so much had been removed before, both my knees basically landslide into the sides, and nothing's running straight anymore. So they had to cut into my tibia bone, shift it across, rejiggle everything, 2 bolts back in, put it all back together.
Wow, that's
knee replacements, but I'm just too young. So they cause constant niggles and pain, and you try and get around it, but bottom line is, I wish they didn't hurt all the time.
I didn't actually recognize how many injuries that the sport actually would cause other than impact. So outside, away from the impact.
So the impact when you're learning, you're black and blue with bruises. You hit the wall, it hurts. You're hitting it hard, it's ice. So, you have bruises up and down your arms, up and down your legs, your ankles, and you get battered. In those first few years when you're learning, you get hurt. And then obviously you don't. You learn to not, and you might take the odd tap, but you learn how to stop yourself from crashing. So it's very rare to actually crash later on. You might get the odd bump and bruise and shake yourself up. But then, it's almost like overuse, because we'd be training. I lifted weights from like the age of, when I was doing athletics, 15, 16, doing Olympic lifts. And then when I was doing skeleton, we were training 2-3 times a day, every day. So almost that wear and tear. I think everyone's body, if you're just 1% slightly wonky in one area, you might not ever know as a normal human being. And then you take it to the extreme. You take your body to the extreme of that top athlete, and that 1-2% slightly wonked here and there, you're suddenly going to know about it. And that kind of overuse soon comes.
I know what you mean. My career ended through injury, and it's all down to, cricket as a sport is just weird body positions, forces going through different areas, and different speeds and rotation here, there, and everywhere. And ultimately, if your technique is something that gets you slightly in a position that isn't favorable for your body, bang, it just chisels away at a spot through over time, and then eventually, bang, it does break. But how did you when you're getting those injuries, those crashes, how did you deal with what I imagine would be very fearful, standing at the top of a luge again, ready to hurtle yourself down there? Like, how do you manage that side of it and manage your mind going into a very scary situation, having just had a crash that you've physically hurt yourself and you might happen again.
It's really tough. It's really, really tough. You're petrified, you're scared, you're physically hurting. So long as your sled is okay and it's not bent, or something's gone wrong, and you physically you can get to the top and go again. It's just hardcore. You just have to do it. You just have to get to the top and go down. And we have no brakes. It's not like you can slow the sled down, and it really is mind over matter. Okay, let's figure out why I think it crashed. You're with your coach, and we don't have cameras. When I was competing, we only had literally one coach with one camera, or if we were lucky, you might have two people and a support staff with two cameras. You can only really focus on one corner at a time, an exit, an entrance. You choose that one tricky corner. Now, as the years have gone on, I think the team have got 5, 6, 7 cameras with different support staff. So you can suddenly cover a lot more of the track. So yeah, you might not have had a camera on that one corner that you crashed at. So normally it's that knock-on effect. Well, what actually happened in that corner before? And why did I maybe come out of that one slightly wrong, to be angled wrong, to enter that one corner in the wrong way that made you then crash? And you crash because you get those oscillations wrong. You're high at the wrong point, you're too high, your sled's angled the wrong way, and then that pressure will come off, and all of a sudden the sled will drop and it can flip you over at the end, and you crash, and that's all happening at 70, 80 miles per hour. Yep. So it is really hard. You have to get up and first of all try and work out, well, why did I crash? Okay, do I know why? Right. Okay, well, I'm going to have to change that. And you really rerun that in your head, that mental imagery, that pattern in your head. Okay, I'm not going to make that same mistake. We know why. Let's try and change it. And you're really trying to do that positive self-talk. Okay, let's try and nail this. But it's so hard when you're kind of almost going down that track, dreading it, like, oh crap, here it comes, here it comes. Oh, no. And at the same time, you can't think like that. There have definitely been times, and there's certain tracks, St. Moritz, the most beautiful track in the world, Switzerland, blue sky, mountains everywhere, the most glamorous place you can be. And I loved sliding the track. It's the only natural track in the world made up from ice at the frozen lake at the bottom, and it's all beautifully done. And there was one corner, and it got me nearly every single time. I was always the fastest athlete up into this one corner. Then I just could not do it. Always crashed or hit on the way out, lost my speed, and never won a race there. And yet I could have, should have. And there was just that one corner. And I really hurt myself there once. I bent my sled, I smashed my whole helmet up. You just don't want to go down. You're like, I'm done, please. I just want to run away now and go home and just cry. Like, it's hardcore.
Isn't it funny that you can have courses like that where you just got this mental block, you physically can do it. I've played at grounds where you kind of just go in there and it's almost like you've lost before you get there, and you're like, well, I've never played well here. I had that issue, and I've always thought how you perhaps turn that one around. I guess it's through an experience. I guess it's through, you have to have that positive experience on that run, that ground, that wherever you're at, in order to feel like I can do this. I'm in.
Yeah, and I think it's I guess for us it's really trying to make things into facts. Okay, right. This is the fact, like I went in too far to the left, or I didn't nail the corner beforehand, that knock-on effect, right? Just because that happened. Or the hardest thing for us is if someone crashes before your run. So you're at the top of the track, the previous athlete's gone down, a really good athlete, and they crash. And then you're like, oh, hell, well, what happened? Why did they crash? Like, what went wrong? What's wrong with the track? Like, is the ice extra quick today? And that ice, if they prepare it well, it could be 1 second quicker, 2 seconds quicker. That can make a massive effect of what happens in each corner, especially as you get quicker on the way down. You have to really nail your steers, sometimes steer harder at the entrance of certain corners because of the G-force. So you have to be really on it and change and switch within those split seconds. So that can be a major, like, okay, just because they crashed, it does not mean I'm going to crash. I will do my steers, and I have prepared And, really that kind of, okay, like I'm a different human being. This is different.
How much are your coaches helping you out at this period? Like if you've had like a little bit of a setback, did you have good coaches, good experiences with them being there and supporting you, or did you have not so good?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the coaches in that sense weren't really, they're not really psychology trained or anything. We were very lucky to have a psychologist in the year building up to the Olympics, where we had more money to be able to obviously bring one on. Now I think there is full-time psychologists working with the team. My coach was an Austrian guy, so he was very kind of old school, shall we say, old school Austrian. No sympathy, no sympathy at all. You crash, you get to the top and you go back down. Tough love. That was it, So, along with language barriers and all the rest of it. Yeah, no, that was it. You just got to the top and you went back down. Now I think there is a little bit more sympathy and, that kind of human side of it. And there is psychologists to help you more. But ultimately, you've got to be made up right in the head to be good at our sport. It's a tough sport. It's got those different psychology part of it. Like any top high performing sport, you've got to nail that psyche as much as the physical side of your sport. It's, it's a 50-50, I think, when it comes to that high performing game.
Yeah, it's such a common reoccurring thing in a lot of the interviews and the people I speak with. And doesn't matter how good an athlete you are, at the end of the day, like if you mentally are just off it a little bit, it's just such a common thing that's coming about. And it's interesting you say like what type of person you have to be to do your sport. I imagine you have to be that very almost adrenaline junkie fueled, like I'm there for the thrill. There has to be a huge thrill and a huge buzz when you get to the bottom, whether you've won, lost or whatever, because the speed you're going, just the natural excitement of the sport. How did you feel like you were getting addicted to that sort of that rush of it? Have you always been addicted to it, or is it a certain mentality that your sport draws in?
Yeah, it's funny. Like before the sport, I never thought I was this adrenaline seeker. When I look back at it now, and it was funny, I did a podcast yesterday for someone, and I kind of look back, and before I did skeleton, I used to look after and ride a lot of horses. Just around the fields where I lived, kind of just got involved. And before I know it, I'm looking after 3 horses. I've never had a riding lesson in my life. I literally just jump on and I can ride, that kind of a thing. So actually, maybe there is always that slight wild side of me that, hey, like you crack on and you do it type of thing. And something that I guess made me want to do it. But I think it still came down to, I just wanted to be really good at something. I really wanted to push myself. And when I found, whichever sport, so, in one sense, skeleton sort of found me, I wanted to be good. And I think I loved the summer training. So I loved being in the gym. I loved weightlifting and feeling strong and fast. And that's 50% of it. Our life in the summer was training in the gym, being home. I'm a massive home bird. So being home and going every day to the gym, I love that. And then you've obviously got that winter side of traveling, which I really didn't like. After a while, I did not like traveling at all. It gets to you like everything. But then, there is that thrill, I guess. There is that when you nail a great run, that feeling of flying, that you got to the bottom of the track and you don't really know how or why, that kind of automatic pilot. And when you and your sled become one being, that's the aim. You don't even notice the sled underneath you. You are so in sync with each other. You get down. It's like driving your car when everything just feels great. So, I guess there is that thing in you. And it's quite hard when I decided to stop, you need that thing to push yourself and to challenge yourself. And then I guess it sort of never leaves you. Probably like every athlete, it never quite leaves you. There's always something that is up for a challenge. If someone throws something at you, you're like, I wonder if I could do that. All right, I'll give that a go.
Have you felt like you've filled that potential void that would be there from not going down the luge as often or at all? Have you even been down? When was the last time you went down when you were on the scale?
So the last time I went down was World Champs 2012, February I don't know when, February 27th, 28th, or something like that.
Really
the day I retired,
up.
and I said, right, that's it. I have never been on it again. I've had opportunities. I mean, I would take different people for weekends and coach them, train them. I need to really buddy up with them again, actually. Momentum Ski were a big company doing very exclusive sort of ski trips and, with the top chefs in the world and do fabulous weekends and weeks. And we would go off to Innsbruck in Austria, where there's a track in Eagles. And group of people, I teach you how to slide. It's a gentle, easy track and go from halfway. So you don't go from the top. So I've had opportunities that I probably could have grabbed a sled and go on, but I don't have my own sled anymore. That was taken off me. I have elements of it. So I have my runners, I have my saddle, but I think unless I was on a sled that was designed for me, set up for me, it's a very complicated setup that needs to be perfect for you. I don't want to. There's no point just getting on some old battered sled that's been in a shed that is absolutely perfectly fine for beginners to go on. Don't get me wrong, it's perfectly safe for them to go on. But if you're going to do it, then you want something that's really set up and feels what would have felt like my old sled, which doesn't exist anymore. But, I kind of would want to do it like that. But I don't know, I just sort of, that was that. It's a chapter. It was done. And that was my life. And sort of it makes me sad that I'm not a swimmer or a cyclist where you could just every day still get in a swimming pool or every day just get on that bike. The tracks, you can't just rock up to a track and have a go. You need to lug around that equipment. You need to, officially put your name down and all these different things. It's hard. You can't just click your fingers and go and do it. So I think you accept that almost when you retire, that is potentially, that's it. That is the last time you might do it, especially with us, a nation that doesn't have their own ice track. Some of the oldie goldies in all the other countries, the Austrians have, masters races all the time. They're always on it. They never really stopped that. It's normal for them just to crack on because it's like going to a football club every evening or five-a-side football on a Thursday night. They just do the same thing on the skeleton track. So it is a weird feeling. And I guess since retiring, I was lucky. I've gone off, I've done some rallying. I have it's ran out now, but I had my co-driving license and did several Wales Rally GBs as a co-driver. I've done cycling. I did a big TV show that was a cycling TV show doing a stage of the Tour de France. That was hardcore, really learning how to ride a bike properly with, cleats and getting fit. Yeah. But again, I loved it from zero. And it was really soon after a knee operation. I was only like 8 weeks post one of my major knee op. So again, it was a mission. It was a mission to get fit, get on that bike, zero to mountain stage of the Tour de France, all in the space of 3 months, I think it was. And I loved it. That was pre-kids, responsibility, being a mom, like every day you could dedicate to being on the road, being on the bike, being on the watt bike and smashing it. And, I loved it.
Yeah, I guess having kids would be an adrenaline rush as it is.
It slightly ruins it, I have to admit. Sometimes you definitely don't have that spare time.
Yeah, that's all we need. Look, I guess I just want to kind of finish off here and for a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about is really about kind of this idea of fear, this unknown that you're potentially going into. If anyone is listening and it has those sort of doubts and fears about going into something that is potentially scary, what advice would you have to that person?
Prepare. Like, if I think back, it might be scary. Accept that it could be scary. Is it a job interview? Is it a competition? If you're an athlete, you're going to be scared. You might be nervous. Your legs might be shaking, all those physical butterflies in the belly. Accept that that's going to happen. Right, that's it. I am going to feel like that. And then prepare. For me, it was just still knowing that I had prepared the very best. If you've prepared your very best, no matter what you do and your outcome, it is still going to be you giving your very best. And I think then no matter what happens, you can't regret it. You know, that cliche of have no regrets. But, you know, that was me at the Olympics. It was like, whatever my result was going to be, I was going to have no regrets because I had prepared, you know, I was, took my confidence from being prepared. And and I think just accepting and acknowledging that you will feel nervous and you will feel scared. And I had to kind of reverse the fact of those butterflies in my tummy that were nerves. I had to switch it and say they're excitement. The physical response of being excited with those butterflies is still the same feeling as being nervous. You still have that uncomfortable butterfly feeling. So for me, it was like, no, you're excited to compete. You're excited to see what your results could be. Yes, you're nervous, but switch it over, you know, and kind of like switch over that self-talk from a positive to a negative.
Did you find there were times where that didn't work, or did you find that it also, you go, oh, I'm trying to figure this out, I'm trying to switch it to being positive, and then was it more of a go into that experience, try to be as positive, try and flip that feeling sensation? If it works, great. If it doesn't, we go again, we try again, and we just keep trying to do that.
Yeah, you know, you're kidding yourself sometimes. You're like, okay, I'm just saying this stuff, but let's face it, I'm really nervous. You know, of course you are. And I was at the Olympics, you know, my legs were shaking. Of course I was super nervous. You know, so there is that element that you're like, I know I'm just kidding myself, telling myself this isn't the Olympic Games, I'm just doing another race. But you know jolly well it is the Olympic Games. So yeah, it is. It's you just, the more you practice it, the more you go over it, using those other smaller competitions to practice that thought process. Yeah, it's just doing that best and still knowing, well, at least I've prepared for it in the best way I can.
Yeah, that's actually an amazing place to leave it. Amy, thank you so much for your time. Where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, well, I guess like most people, I try and live my life quite a bit on Instagram. So I mean, I've got my personal training website that's going out there, and I'm trying to pick up clients. But no, I mean, Instagram is where I kind of put my life out there. And through lockdown, I'm trying my hardest to give people workouts and stay active. You know, get that mental well-being and stay positive, get the fresh air in the lungs each day. So yeah, I guess find me on there.
Amazing. That's at Amy Joy Williams on Instagram, and I'll leave all the links in the show notes. Your energy is awesome. No doubt people should give you a follow and reach out if they're looking for some help. But thank you so much for your time. Really, really do appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.